Hello again, trench diggers. Now you're probably wondering, what the heck is the interface? Was that just clickbait? Well, the answer is no. The interface is everything that goes between your body and your snowboard. I'm talking about boots, bindings, risers, and the specific way you set these things up. But first, we're going to answer the age-old question that's been burning in everybody's mind. What is in James's boots? All right, check it out. First thing I want you to notice is that the buckle and the ladder on my back toe are reversed. This makes sure that there's nothing there that's going to drag, minimizes my overhang on the toe side, and as you just saw, helps me get out in one motion looking super smooth. Okay, the boot. This is a standard Driver X with a handful of custom modifications I'm going to show you right now. First thing is I've got two straps, cinching it all together, adding some stiffness. The reason I use two is so that I can tighten this one and then tighten this one and then go back and get even more stiffness out of it. On the best days, the perfect corduroy, there's almost no limit to how stiff I want my interface to be. But, you know, if it gets bumpy rough, okay, I'm going to back it off a little bit for sure. I need some mobility to absorb those imperfections. All right, let's keep going here. Next thing I have in here is a custom boot stiffener. These are not quite available yet on the market, but I'm working on it, hopefully soon. Next up, this is a custom liner actually from a snowboard race boot. What it's got is a hard plastic tongue in the front, adding more stiffness, meaning I can push further into the front of my boot, into the tongue. Now there's a reason why the top of the line snowboard boot is about $600, whereas a top of the line ski boot is around $1,200. Part of that reason is the liners. So when you get your snowboard boots, first thing you should do is throw those liners away. Get yourself something in this style is what I recommend. Some people like the Intuition wraps. It's not for me. I like that hard plastic tongue in front. I actually go to my local boot fitter because every time they sell a boot, they rip out the liners and throw them in a pile and sell them a custom foam molded liner, right? So 50 bucks and I walk away with a high quality liner with the plastic in the front. Do have also in here a custom footbed. Oh, it doesn't want to come out, but I recommend those for comfort. That can help a lot. After that, I have one other item. This one is actually Ryan Napton's idea, and I really like it. I have in my front boot a shin guard for volleyball. Just put right against the back here to just add some little bit of extra leverage on heel side. Welcome to the boardroom. We're going to look at some bindings. I have here a set of Flow NX2 Carbon Fusion. I have the Flux XV. I have a Nidaker Supermatic. I have a Now O-Drive, and I have a Drake Podium FF. We're going to assess these bindings and a couple others that I don't have in the room on 4 factors. The first one is the BO factor, the boot out factor. It basically refers to the length that the binding is adding to the boot. We're going to talk about that momentarily. The next most important factor is the performance of the binding, which is very closely correlated with things like stiffness, response, and the connection to the board. The third factor is comfort, which I deem less important because, you know, sometimes you got to sacrifice comfort for performance. And the fourth factor is the quality or the longevity, how long this binding is going to last you. Turns out every binding breaks in with time. They might seem very stiff out of the box, but like your boots, you know, give it 20, 40 days and it's not the same anymore. Let's look at the boot out factor first. Pretty straightforward. Okay. You can see right here, there's some small distance between the square and the toe of the boot, And in the back here, there's actually a fair bit of distance. I can fit a whole finger in. So every millimeter of length that I'm adding onto the boot is a millimeter extra I have to put into my waist width. And I'm already maxing out a bunch of my suppliers, so I don't really have that room in the waist. Riding a lower BO factor binding means you can ride a less wide board. Yeah, let's look at these bindings as measured. So all I'm doing here is I'm putting the boot against the block, I'm marking it, then I'm putting the boot in the binding, putting it against the block, marking it again, moving the block, doing it again. I think we have 5 bindings. Results are in the end. You could see through those measurements that this Flux XV is going to add 14 millimeters, 1.4 centimeters to the length of your boot, versus this Flow NX2, which you can see adds 0 in the back and 0 in the front. It hits the boot, not the binding, back and front. So again, that's 14 millimeters I can take out of the waist of my board. Let's look at some other things here before we start assessing these bindings. I want to talk a little bit about canting and lifting. Let's look at this one here. This is a Flux XV. It comes with a flat base plate. So what I've done here is I've added some strips of rubber along the right side of my front boot, about 1/4 inch. And then I've added another layer across the toe of my front boot, again 1/4 inch. So what I'm doing is I'm lifting the toe and I'm canting inward. The back binding will be similar. We're canting inward, but I lift the heel. This kind of position just gets me much more comfortable, balances me better. I have no pain in the hip, and I find it a more aggressive, better stance for carving. So I do these to a lot of my bindings. Let's look real quick at this one here. This is the Drake Podium. Now this one already has, I believe, 4 degrees of inward canting. So I only had to add a little strip under the toe for the front foot, and then under the heel in the back foot. Back foot's not here. One more real quick will be this here. So every time I do this to a set of bindings, it's a custom job. Every binding is different. Every base plate has different requirements. I need to be able to access the screws and take them out. So it's always a little awkward. But here, I might have to, I just want to show you something if you can see it here. On this binding, also a front, I just added a big 1/4 inch piece under my toes. But I also added a strip because this one does have inward canting, but only 2 degrees, and I wanted a little more. So I added a very thin strip of rubber, and frankly, I just drop it in the base plate before I put the footbed on, and it stays. And I don't have a problem with that. I can access my screws. I don't need to glue nothing. Everything's great. I recommend you try this. I think it's worthwhile for carving especially. I think the inward canting that a lot of binding manufacturers supply is excellent if you're in a duck stance. But the further forward you go with your stance, the more you also need to add the lift. Front toes up, back heel up. Yeah, bindings. Let's talk. Where should we start? Let's start with the Nidecker Supermatic. Now these are all bindings. Let me say up front, except for this pair that doesn't belong to me, I paid for all these bindings. I have no sponsorships or affiliation. I paid for these full price. Yeah, and I've ridden a lot of bindings and other bindings as well. I'm going to give you my honest opinion from a carving perspective. Okay, there are lots of bindings out there designed and built to do many other things, but I'm a carver. I'm talking about the best carving bindings. So the Nidecker Supermatic, I have not ridden it. I cannot say what the feel is. I cannot say anything about the comfort or the quality. However, as measured, as you just witnessed, this is 32 millimeters, 3.2 centimeters longer than the Now. And that's just impossible. So in my opinion, impossibly long. I mean, I'm not gonna be able to carve that. I'm gonna boot out. I'm gonna need such a massive board for the same amount of boot out that I'm gonna get on this binding as I'm gonna get with this binding. So to me, pure and simple, this is not a carving binding. Performance, comfort, all other factors aside, the BO factor is just too big, and I wouldn't try to carve that in anything but greens on a super wide board. Next up, let's look at the Drake Podium. Now this one I've seen on websites as a 9 on 10 for stiffness. And you know, it's a relatively stiff binding, but on my scale of carving bindings, this is a 5. I find this binding very high quality, very comfortable, not as stiff as I like for riding my biggest boards. The thing about interface is the boot stiffness, the binding stiffness have to match the board stiffness. You don't want to be overpowering a soft board with a super stiff interface, and you don't want to be riding a sloppy interface on a super stiff board. So for most of the boards I ride, this is just not doing it for me. I really like a stiffer binding. I get them so stiff with the straps sometimes I feel like I just lean into the boot top and I can relax my feet. And that's the feeling I want to get, the relaxed feeling as my board carves through the turn. So for me, stiffer is better. There is a limit to how stiff I want to go, but if the conditions are good, I'm going to say stiffer is better. As long as you've got circulation in your feet, I think the performance goes up. However, when you start to get bumps and ruts, small push piles, moguls, whatever, ice chunks, you need to be able to move around. You need to have some flexibility to absorb those bumps. And that's when I would say your bindings can be too stiff. So yeah. Right, so that's the Drake Podium FF. Oh yeah, also very high quality binding. I've had 2 sets of these. I used to use these for testing boards, and I don't know exactly how many days I have in these bindings, but I have never replaced even a ladder on these. These are fantastic, very high quality bindings. Like I said, high performance as well, but not as stiff as I generally like. The Now O-Drive is also marketed as a carving binding, and this is actually a much stiffer binding. When you put your boots into these, you feel that's a stiff binding. And if you're not moving, if you're just standing on the board, I would give it a 9. However, it has the skate tech. So once you start to move and put a lot of pressure into the board, now it moves around. It moves around along this axis, this kingpin down the center, but it's made to go kind of back and forth like that to absorb bumps. I would suggest it's actually a really nice feeling, and I like it, but not necessarily for carving. This is going to absorb a lot of bumps. It's going to save you a lot of energy. It's super comfortable, super cushy ride. But, you know, for the kind of turns that I want to be making on the best days, I need secure attachment to my board. I can feel the board kind of moving under me when I'm in these bindings, and I can see my track is wider because I'm not able to control the board with my feet as well as I could with a binding that's fixed more solidly to the board. So I definitely see why some people like them. High quality, high performance, and excellent for comfort. This is actually the binding I turn to when I'm getting some soreness from my other bindings that are less comfortable. I come back to this for a few days until the pain goes away, and then if the conditions are good, I want my stiffer bindings again. Yeah. Good for absorbing bumps. I think a lot of people like the skate tech. I got nothing against it, but for me, on the big boards, I want a more solid attachment. Next up is the Flux XV. This is a very high performance binding. I would say the comfort level is low. I would say the stiffness level is very high. The adjustability level is good, right? Because I'm going to want to turn my high backs. You know, when you get to start to get to steep angles like 30 and 15, you got to rotate that high back. Otherwise, if that high back was at 30 degrees, when I go to pressure the nose of my board on heel side, my calf is just falling out. There's nothing here to stop it. So I do like to rotate my high backs. Not every high back is rotatable. And I think it's more and more important as your angles get steeper to be able to rotate your high back. So for a carving binding, a rotatable high back is an excellent idea. What else about this one? Yeah, that's about it. Until I discovered actually the flows this year, I would have said, if you'd asked me a year ago, this is the highest performance binding on the market. But again, not the most comfortable, not the highest quality, but if you want performance, I definitely recommend the Flux XV. Now, the last one on our list here is the Flow NX2 Carbon Fusion. This binding I bought this season because I had an arm injury. I actually started this season riding with my arm in a sling inside my jacket, and I needed something I could operate with one hand. This, by the way, the sling turned into the pockets, and maybe you've seen the video. Yeah, that's where that came from. So that's what I bought these. Immediately, I noticed how incredibly stiff they were and how I could just lean into the boot tops. And I would have said at the beginning of this season that if the Flux XV is a 9, the Flow NX2 Carbon Fusion is an 11. However, they have broken in now, and they're not quite as stiff. I'd say they're comparable. It might still be a little stiffer than the XV, but these XVs have a lot more days, so it's hard to really compare. This binding is not super adjustable, and I do have some issues with the design, and actually would love to get in touch with Flow about some design modifications to improve this binding. But in the meantime, this is my binding of choice. High performance, at least as high as any other board binding on this table, and 0 boot out factor, which just lets me straighten my legs and lean the board over as far as I want, angulate it, pick it up real high without worrying about boot out. And I love that feeling. When conditions are firm, it doesn't really matter so much what I'm riding. But when conditions are soft, boot out becomes a major, major issue. And that's when I start to add risers on my board, I start to go stiffer, and I start to look for a binding like this that's going to be the lowest profile in existence. You've heard maybe the ratchets are stiff. They are stiff. They do loosen up with time. It's an excellent ratchet. This will crush your boot if you keep cranking on it, which is good until you start to feel pain. But that's how it is, right? Comfort, performance, always a trade-off. 2 other bindings I wanted to mention, which are marketed at carvers, which I don't have in the room here, and I have not ridden either of them, but I have hand flexed both. First is the F2 Eliminator, which in my opinion is a way soft binding. If this, we're calling that Drake Podium a 5, the F2 Eliminator is maybe a 3. This is a soft binding. I'm surprised it's even marketed at carvers. The other one is the Ride A10, which I actually would love to try one day, but I got enough bindings for now. I will say, by hand flexing, it seems incredibly stiff. Can't speak to comfort, of course. I can speak to longevity and quality because I've ridden a lot of different ride bindings. This pair, for example, probably went 120 days before I even replaced a ratchet on it. And I'm still riding them with, new ratchet that was super easy to find. It's not my only set of ride bindings, but these are the ones that have lasted me the longest, I gotta say. I think that's pretty much it for the binding rundown. Let's look real quick at risers, okay? So if you're riding whatever board you're riding, if you're having trouble with boot out, one of the ways to mitigate boot out is to just get higher up off the board. And that's what these risers are going to do for you. On that topic, other ways to mitigate boot out include bending your knees more and using a down unweighted turn. More on the unweighting in another video. This is what I got here, okay? This is just a 2-piece. Where did I put those? I got some here. It's just a little bit of hardware. It's just an M5 screw and then a hex nut with an M5 hole at the back, right? These just screw right into your inserts. And then you drop it on. No problem. Adjust the angle. Screw your binding in. Easy. Extra lift. This is super soft. This will not affect the ride performance. It just gives you lift. These, however, is sort of a riser and a plate in one. These are made by JCJ Anderson. This is a product I think a lot of you will be interested in. What it does is it's going to stiffen your board right under your bindings. Some people complain about bindings that have too wide a base plate and they feel a dead spot, and I think that's problematic if buttering is your top priority. However, if you're carving, that extra stiffness under the bindings is actually going to help you. It's going to help your board deal with more edge pressure and more speed. So you're going to be able to keep carving that board on steeper terrain. So if you take your stock carving board, whatever it is, and you add these to it, immediately you're making that stock carving board into, that stock all mountain into a better carving board. You're stiffening it, you're getting up off the board, which gives you more leverage and more clearance. Yeah, and your board's going to go faster. So I think if you can't afford a new board, but you know, you're booting out and you want to carve better, faster, harder, this is an excellent product. JCJ.com, it's milled out in the back, and this butterfly shape is intended to allow the board to flex torsionally without too much interference, right? It's quite thin here in these points. So you're not losing much in the torsional flex, which you need for shock absorption, but you are adding some longitudinal you're adding some longitudinal stiffness, which is going to help your board go faster and hold more edge pressure. These ones are actually also made by JCJ, but I'm not sure he's making them anymore. I am working on a plan to bring affordable risers to North America. I need a little more time. Stay tuned to the channel, and you'll be the first to know when the products are available. Hey, I'm on the Gandhi with a couple seconds here to show you some cool bindings. What I got here is a Ride A8. Pretty sure it has the same aluminum chassis as the Ride A10, but a softer high back. And I really like the stiffer high back on the A10. I've never ridden this, but I would suspect this is an excellent high performance binding. This one is the Flux CV, and I really like the look and the shape, and it looks like the strength too, in this base plate heel cup one piece molded. But I wonder why they pair the higher high back for the free carving binding with the, God damn it. I'm wondering why they pair the higher heel cup for better free carving with less boot out with the softer high back. And I'd like to ride this one also with like an XV high back. I think that would be wicked. But both of these are high performance bindings, I'm sure. So one other thing that's super important but often overlooked when setting bindings on a board is where your bindings are relative to the side cut. So let me show you how this is done. You can see here I have 5 insert packs. So I'm going to mark the center one just with my eye, and I'm going to put each binding on the center. Okay, so of course I've already set my discs to the angles I want. 2712, right? Now I'm going to measure the center of my bindings, and I happen to know it's 57 because I ordered this board with a 57 centimeter stance. But let's say I want to ride 55, okay? Instead of just bringing one back or bringing one forward, I'm going to stay centered on those insert packs. So I'm going to move this in 1 centimeter, and I'm going to move this one in 1 centimeter. And now I know I'm at 55, and I'm still balanced, perfectly centered on the center of the insert packs. Now, if I want to be riding more forward or more back, I move them both together. I tend to ride my boards in the forwardmost inserts. Some people I know that are good riders like to ride them back. I would suggest experiment, see what works for you. But the important thing is that you're not moving one or the other binding independently. You're moving them both forward, back, right? You find the center, and then you find your width by moving them both forward or out, and then you move them both forward or back together. Donick Snowboards has a very interesting article on their website that explains this in more detail, but it is important if you want to be in harmony with your side cut, the shape of your board as the builder intended it. just a couple other little items before I dismiss the class, mostly about how to set up your bindings. So, stance first. I'm recommending people try a carving stance of 27 degrees in the front and positive 12 in the back. 30-15 is also fine. I really recommend you try the drills there, practice your carving there, and then take it to whatever stance you want to ride eventually and play with it. In this sport, I'm constantly making adjustments. Even after so many decades of experience, I'm still playing with new things, and my body is not the same as your body. So by all means, play with the lift, play with the cant, play with the angles, play with the high back rotation, play with board width, whatever you want. I'm not saying that posy is the best stance. This is what you always have to ride. I'm saying this is the best stance. This is what you always have to ride for carving. Okay. This is one of my powder boards. This is a Furberg, and I ride 18 and -6 on this. That's a better stance for that board on powder days. This thing, however, I would not go below positive 12 in the back foot. I'm going to get chatter. That, for my body, that's my limit. When I go 9 to 12, I notice how much smoother it is at 12. When I go 12 to 15, I notice almost nothing. The biggest reason I go steeper than 27-12 is to prevent boot out when I need to. Okay, so setting up your bindings. Now you know about stance. Now we got to talk a little bit about centering. Okay, so if you look here, take this square, I get about a finger in there. It's about 3/8 of an inch. And when I come here, just a hair less, maybe 5/16. But this boot is really quite well centered on the board. This is important, okay? If you are too far to the heel or too far to the toe, you're going to have boot out on that side. So centered is best. When I have the option, I will offset slightly to the toe side, so I get a slight toe side bias. Not because I boot out more on heel, but because when I do boot out on heel side, it tends to be more catastrophic than it is on toe side. So if I have the room, I'll push them a little bit towards the toe. In these bindings, I'm maxed out. That's as far as I can go, and it happens to be almost perfectly centered, absolutely acceptable. If I happen to have a binding that is centered with the binding centered and I have the option, I'll bring the back foot a little bit more forward than the front foot. Because when you start to get into these steep angles, the further you move that back foot back behind you, the less stable you're going to be. The more you bring it forward, oh look, now I'm in a more or less parallel stance, right? So if I can, I'll take one notch forward in the back foot, but boot out is the most important thing. So that's just if I have a super wide board and a super low profile binding that fits my boot perfectly. Generally speaking, the bindings are made a little larger, a little small, and that's why you have to offset. So let's look at these discs here. These are the discs from Flow. It may be hard to see in the video, but actually the holes are not centered. They're offset a little bit towards the top here. So that gives you some adjustment when you mount them this way along the longitudinal axis of your board to either offset slightly to the toe or slightly to the heel, and that's great. If that's not enough, and also many discs are like this. Now discs are like this with an offset. Flux discs are like this with an offset, and I really like that because it gives you a little more adjustability than just having, both down the center. However, on almost all of my bindings, I end up turning the disc 90 degrees, and that way I have even more options for side-to-side motion on the binding. So if you need to do that, that's how it's done. These bindings do not have a rotatable high back, but they do lock in really well with a good cup here. But in general, when you start to get to these stances, you want that high back parallel with the back of the board. So when you're pushing off in this direction, there's something to catch you. So wherever possible, line up your heels. Line up your high backs with your heel edge. That's about it. If you want to be up to date on the latest carving tech, subscribe to our mailing list in the description. And have fun out there. Practice the drills, get your stance, find something comfortable, some heel lift in the back, some toe lift in the front, some inward canting, whatever it takes to find a comfortable position that makes you feel powerful and makes your carves look smooth. And see you next time. No slarving.